When you finally step into retirement, something unexpected happens. Life does not explode into excitement the way people promise. Instead, it becomes quieter. Not empty, not lonely, just quietly different in a way that no one ever explained. After decades filled with schedules, responsibilities, and noise, the silence that arrives can feel almost unfamiliar. And in that silence, you begin to notice things you never paid attention to before. Subtle shifts in friendships, in your daily rhythm, in the way your home feels when the morning light comes in. These changes are gentle, but they shape you more deeply than you might expect. Today, I want to share the 7 quiet changes that happen after you retire. Not the ones in books or advice columns, but the ones you only understand once you're living them. Stay with me, because you may find your own story between these words. 1. The quiet social circle. When I first stepped into retirement, the very first thing I noticed was not the freedom everyone talks about. It was the silence, not the kind of silence that comes from being alone in a room, but the silence that settles in when the world stops needing you every second of the day. For decades, my phone was a steady stream of voices, reminders, requests, questions, and obligations. People reached out because I had answers. I had authority. I had a role that mattered in their lives. I did not realize how much noise that role created until it suddenly disappeared. In the early weeks of retirement, I kept checking my phone as if I had misplaced it. I would pick it up, tap the screen, and wait for something to appear. A message, a missed call, anything. But the phone stayed quiet. It took me a while to admit that the quiet was not an accident. It was a truth. Most people were calling the position I held, not the person I was, and when the position went away, the voices faded with it. This kind of quiet makes you think differently. You start noticing who still reaches out because they truly care, not because they need something from you. You see which friendships were built on shared responsibilities and which ones were built on genuine connection. The circle becomes smaller, but strangely, it becomes more honest. You realize that quiet does not mean abandoned. It simply means filtered. What remains is real. There is a moment in retirement when you look around and understand that the noise of your old life was not the same as closeness. It was activity. And activity is not the same as connection. The quiet helps you see that. It helps you choose the people you want to keep close instead of being surrounded by people who only wanted your time and your effort. It is a gentle change, but a meaningful one. And for the first time in a long time, you learn who is walking with you because they want to, not because they have to. 2. The quiet structure. The second quiet shift arrived in a way I did not expect. It was the quiet of a day without a script. For most of my adult life, my calendar shaped everything. I woke up at the same time, ate at the same time, drove the same route, and followed the same rhythm year after year. My structure was not something I thought about. It was simply a part of me, like breathing. When retirement began, I turned off my alarm clock. It felt symbolic, almost celebratory. But the next morning, I woke up later than usual, and for the first time in years, I had nowhere to be. No meeting to prepare for, no problem waiting on my desk, no deadline chasing me from the moment my feet hit the floor. I stood in the kitchen, coffee in hand, wondering what to do next. It should have felt liberating. Instead, it felt uncertain. Without structure, time stops behaving the way you expect. It stretches, it slows. It waits for you to decide what to do with it. At first, that freedom feels almost uncomfortable, as if you have stepped into a room that is too large. You begin to notice how long the morning feels, how quiet the afternoon becomes, and how the hours between dinner and bedtime seem to expand. But here is the important part. The quiet structure does not stay strange forever. Slowly, you start shaping your days based on what feels meaningful, not what feels urgent. You take walks because you want to. You read because you enjoy it, not because you squeezed it in between responsibilities. You learn to let your day breathe. Retirement teaches you that structure should serve you, not rule you. And with time, the quiet becomes a space where you can finally hear your own pace. 3. the quiet financial shift. One of the most surprising changes in retirement is the way money begins to speak in a different tone. During the working years, income moves like a steady river. You expect it. You rely on it. You build routines around it without even realizing how much comfort that predictability provides. Every month, the flow renews itself, and even when life becomes stressful, that familiar rhythm of earning steadies your mind. You know that whatever you spend today will be replenished soon enough. Retirement brings a different kind of relationship with money, not frightening or harsh, but undeniably quieter. The river becomes a lake, still and calm. The surface does not ripple unless you touch it. And each time you make a decision to withdraw from your savings, you become aware of the movement. You feel the quiet shift inside your thinking. You stop viewing money as something that will appear again on schedule, and you start seeing it as something you built with decades of effort and sacrifice. The first time I sat down with my finances after retiring, I felt a new sense of responsibility even though nothing in the numbers had changed. I had planned, I had saved, I had prepared cautiously. Yet the simple act of stepping into a life without new income changed the meaning of every dollar. Not in a fearful way, but in a mindful way. I began asking myself different questions. Do I really need this? Will this add value to my life? Am I spending out of purpose or out of habit? Questions I never asked during the busy working years suddenly became a natural part of each choice. What surprised me most was how this quiet awareness began to soften my approach to living. I stopped buying things to fill space or to chase brief satisfaction. I found comfort in using what I already had. I noticed how often I spent simply because I was tired or rushed in the past. Retirement has a way of clearing that fog. The slower pace allows you to realize how little you truly need in order to feel secure and content. A meal at home becomes just as satisfying as a night at a restaurant. A well-kept pair of shoes seems perfectly adequate. A repaired object feels wiser than a replaced one. There is a calm dignity in learning to honor the savings you built by hand year after year. It is not about being tight with money, and it is not about fear of the future. It is about recognizing that your financial foundation represents time, labor, health, and years you will never get back. Treating it with care becomes a form of self-respect, and in that quiet financial shift, you discover something unexpected. Security does not come from constant earning. It comes from understanding what truly matters, from appreciating enough, and from realizing that your worth has never been measured in dollars. Retirement teaches you that money behaves differently now because life behaves differently now. The quiet helps you see that your financial stability is not just a number. It is a reflection of the journey you walked to reach this moment. And instead of feeling limited, you feel grounded, you feel aware, you feel peaceful. 4. The quiet shift in identity. There is a moment after retirement when you look in the mirror and realize something subtle has changed. It is not your face, although time certainly leaves its marks. It is not your posture or your voice. It is something deeper, something quieter. It is the part of you that was shaped by your work, your schedule, your responsibilities, and the expectations that carried your name for decades. When those roles fall away, what remains is a version of yourself that you may not have met in a very long time. For most of my adult life, people introduced me through my title. They said what I did before they said who I was. My work became a shorthand for my identity, almost like a label that followed me into every room. And I wore that label with pride. It gave me purpose. It told others what to expect from me. It even told me what to expect from myself. Then retirement arrived, and the label quietly slipped away. I was no longer the man people relied on for deadlines, decisions, and direction. I was simply myself, without the shield of a title. At first, that quiet shift felt almost uncomfortable, as if I were missing a familiar piece of clothing. I caught myself bringing up my old job in conversations, trying to explain who I used to be, as if that proved I still mattered. But the truth is, retirement invites you into a new kind of identity. One that is not defined by tasks or productivity. It asks you to meet yourself without the noise of responsibilities. That meeting can feel intimidating. Yet it is also strangely liberating. Over time, I began to realize that my worth had never been rooted in my position. The world teaches us to measure ourselves by achievement, but retirement teaches us to measure ourselves by presence, by kindness, by the quiet influence we have on the lives around us. My children do not care about the title I once held. They care about the conversations we have now, the time we spend together, and the wisdom I share when life gets confusing for them. My friends value the honesty of our talks, not the stories of past deadlines or accomplishments. The quiet shift in identity also reveals something important. When your title fades, your true character steps forward. You discover strengths that were overshadowed by responsibility. You find interests you did not have time for before. You uncover a different kind of purpose, one that grows from the inside instead of from external recognition. Retirement becomes a chance to redefine yourself, not as a worker, but as a whole person with depth, history, and room to grow. The quiet can be unsettling at first, but it becomes a companion. It encourages reflection. It allows space for healing. It makes you realize that who you are has always been larger than what you did. Retirement does not erase your identity. It reveals it. And in that gentle revelation, you begin to understand yourself in a more honest and peaceful way than ever before. 5. The quiet home. One of the most unexpected changes in retirement is the way your home begins to sound and feel different. When I was working, the house was simply a place to return to after long days. I noticed very little about it. I walked in, dropped my keys on the table, made dinner, watched a little television, and went to bed. The house was more of a station than a companion. I did not pay attention to the quiet because I was rarely still enough to hear it. Retirement changes that in a gentle but unmistakable way. When you spend entire days at home, the silence becomes something you cannot ignore. You begin to hear the slow hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of a clock in another room. You notice the shift in the air when the sun moves across the windows. You become aware of the hollow sound of footsteps on a floor that used to carry more activity. There is a kind of calm in it, but also a sense of space you never noticed before. I started realizing how large the house truly felt once the days grew slower. Rooms that were once filled with motion and voices now held long stretches of stillness. The living room stayed untouched for hours. The hallway remained empty most of the day. Even the kitchen, a place that once saw rushed breakfasts and late-night snacks, felt almost too orderly. At first, I thought the quiet meant something was missing, but over time, I came to understand that the quiet was not a loss. It was an invitation. The home begins to feel like a partner in your new rhythm. It gives you space to think, space to remember, and space to breathe. The quiet corners hold memories you once rushed past. The worn chair by the window becomes a place where you settle with a book or with your thoughts. The photographs on the shelves seem to speak a little louder when the house is still. Even the simple act of drinking coffee at the kitchen table feels different, as if time has finally slowed enough for you to taste the moment. There are days when family visits and the house fills with sound again. Laughter echoes from the rooms. Doors open and close. The air feels lighter, as if the walls themselves are smiling. And when everyone leaves, the silence returns in an even deeper way. It wraps around you softly, reminding you that life has seasons, each with its own music. The noise of a full house is beautiful, but so is the calm of an empty one. What I learned is that the quiet home is not a sign of isolation. It is a reflection of a life that has entered a gentler phase. It is a space that holds your history and gives you room to create new meaning. The home becomes a mirror that shows you who you are when the world is no longer pushing you forward at full speed. Instead of feeling lonely, the quiet begins to feel like a kind of companionship, steady and patient. 6. The quiet health signals. There is a certain type of quiet that settles into your life during retirement, and it comes from your own body. It does not arrive loudly. It does not demand attention the way an injury or an illness might. Instead, it whispers. It taps you gently on the shoulder, almost as if it is asking permission to be noticed. And for the first time in many years, you have the time and stillness to hear it. During my working years, I pushed through discomfort without thinking twice. A sore knee was just a sore knee. A stiff back was simply the result of a long day. I was always too busy to pause long enough to understand what my body was trying to tell me. But retirement slows the world around you, and in that slower rhythm, the signals become clearer. You begin to notice the way you rise from a chair, the way your steps feel on a cool morning, and the way your hands move when you reach for a glass of water. I remember the moment I first became truly aware of these quiet signals. It was a simple morning, no different from any other, and yet, as I walked down the hallway, I felt the slightest resistance in my hip. Not pain, not concern, just a gentle reminder that time had been quietly shaping me. I stopped for a moment, not out of worry but out of recognition. It was the first time I had listened to my body without rushing past it. These little signals do not define retirement, but they certainly influence the way you live it. You start stretching a bit more in the mornings. You choose comfortable shoes over stylish ones without hesitation. You pay attention to how much water you drink, how late you stay up, and how long you sit in one place. Small choices, but meaningful ones. Choices that reflect a growing respect for the body that has carried you through every chapter of your life. There is also a quiet honesty that comes with these signals. You begin to accept that strength looks different now. It is no longer measured by how much you can lift or how fast you can move. Strength becomes the ability to listen to yourself with patience. It becomes the courage to slow down when you need to rest without guilt, and to adjust your habits with kindness rather than frustration. Retirement teaches you that your worth has never been tied to physical perfection. Your worth comes from the life you have lived and the wisdom you carry. What surprised me most was how these subtle shifts brought me a deeper appreciation for my own body. Instead of seeing aging as a decline, I learned to see it as a conversation. A back that tightens after gardening is not a complaint. It is a message. A slower morning is not a limitation. It is a reminder to move with intention. These quiet signals are not warnings. They are guides. Retirement gives you the space to care for yourself in ways you never had time for before. You listen more, you observe more, and slowly you build a gentler partnership with your body, not out of fear of the future, but out of gratitude for the journey you have already taken. In this phase of life, caring for yourself becomes an act of respect, an acknowledgement of everything your body has allowed you to experience. The quiet health signals are not always easy to accept, but they are honest and steady. And with time, you learn that paying attention to them is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of wisdom. 7. The quiet thoughts. The quietest change of retirement does not come from the house, the calendar, the phone, or even the body. It comes from inside. It arrives slowly, almost without your permission, during the moments when the world finally stops demanding things from you. When the house is still, when the morning light settles softly across the table, or when the evening air drifts through an open window, you begin to notice that your thoughts move differently. They are not rushed. They are not interrupted. They begin to rise from places you have ignored for years. During the working years, thinking was something I squeezed into the spaces between responsibilities. My mind was always tied to the next task, the next decision, the next obligation. There was never enough room to reflect on anything beyond the immediate moment. But retirement opens that space again. It gives you a long stretch of quiet where thoughts can expand without pressure. At first, that silence feels almost foreign, as if you have stumbled into a room you forgot existed. But the longer you sit with it, the more familiar it becomes. Some thoughts are gentle, like memories that return with a softness you did not expect. I find myself thinking about moments from decades ago that never seemed important at the time. The way my children ran across the backyard, the sound of laughter during family dinners, the quiet evenings shared with someone I loved, moments that once felt ordinary, but now feel like small treasures. Retirement does not make you dwell on the past. It simply brings it into view with more clarity and appreciation. Other thoughts are more reflective. You begin to consider the choices you made, not with regret, but with understanding. You see your younger self with kinder eyes. You recognize the mistakes, but you also recognize the intentions behind them. There is something healing about that, something peaceful. You start forgiving yourself for things no one else remembers. You start embracing the person you have become, shaped by years of effort, learning, and change. And then there are the deeper thoughts, the ones you never had time to face before. Thoughts about purpose, legacy, faith, and meaning. Retirement does not push these questions on you, but it gently invites them forward. You begin to ask what really matters now that the race is over. You ask what kind of person you want to be in this quiet chapter. You ask what peace looks like, not in the distant future, but today. These quiet thoughts are not always easy, but they are honest. They guide you toward a fuller understanding of your own life. You realize that value is not measured by how busy you are or how much you accomplish. Value is measured by how deeply you live, how sincerely you love, and how openly you reflect. You understand that the inner world you once rushed past is vast and meaningful. And in these quiet moments, something surprising happens. You begin to feel lighter. You begin to feel clearer. You begin to feel connected to your own life in a way you never felt when everything was loud and fast. Retirement becomes not an ending, but a return. A return to yourself, a return to the thoughts you once silenced, a return to the wisdom you spent a lifetime gathering without even knowing it. The quiet thoughts do not overwhelm. They reveal. And in that gentle revelation, you find a deeper truth. The quiet does not take life away. It brings life into focus. The quiet understanding. As I reached this part of retirement, after noticing all the quiet changes that slowly shaped my days, I realized something important. The quiet is not an empty space. It is not a sign that life has grown smaller or that its meaning has faded. The quiet is a teacher. It brings forward parts of your life that were drowned out by noise for far too many years. It allows you to see what truly mattered all along and what never really did. There is a moment, usually late in the evening or early in the morning, when I sit with a cup of coffee and the house is completely still. No deadlines waiting, no phone buzzing, no rush to be anywhere, just the steady rhythm of my own breathing and the soft presence of memories resting gently in the corners of the room. In that calm space, I understand that retirement is not about stepping away from life. It is about stepping into a new, quieter kind of living, one that lets you feel the weight and worth of each day more fully. When you retire, you start to see that the world no longer pulls you in every direction. Instead, it stands beside you, offering choices rather than demands. You have time to reach out to people who matter. You have room to shape your own pace. You have space to build meaning in ways you could not imagine when everything was louder and faster. The quiet circles around you, not as a burden, but as a companion that reminds you to breathe, to reflect, and to appreciate the steady beauty of ordinary moments. I have learned that the quiet is not something to fear. It is something to grow into. It teaches patience. It strengthens gratitude. It brings forward the tender truth that the life you built, with all its twists and turns, has brought you exactly to this moment. And in this moment, you are allowed to rest. You are allowed to choose joy. You are allowed to be present in a way that was nearly impossible when you were pushed by the constant motion of younger years. So if you find yourself stepping into this quieter chapter, or if you are already living within it, know this: you are not losing anything. You are gaining a new kind of clarity. You are gaining the freedom to listen to yourself, to honor your journey, and to live with intention and peace. Retirement does not close your story. It turns the page to a chapter that reveals who you truly are beneath all the noise.